Good evening. I'd like to call this Thursday, March 9th, 2023 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight we'll be following the published and posted agenda. The first item on our meeting agenda this evening is a approval of minutes from February 16th, 2023. With us joining on hybrid from the committee, we also have Kathy Duffett and we have Cindy Goodland. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Yes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Kathy? You're abstaining? You're muted right now, I think. Okay, so it's 4 in favor, 1 abstention, and 3 absent. No, 2 absent, sorry. All right, next on our agenda this evening, we have a review of the fiscal year 24 budget. With us this evening, we have the Superintendent of Chelmsford Public Schools, Jay Lang. We also have on the line the Business Manager, Joanna M. Johnson-Collins. And in the audience, we have a member of, the chair of the Chelmsford Public School District School Committee, Donna Reddy. Newcomb, so I'm sorry. That's my fault. I apologize. All right. No, it's not, but all right. Good evening, Superintendent. Let me unmute you. You are unmuted.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
No, thank you very much. And I normally would come, as I had previously, in person. We're juggling 2 different meetings tonight. We have the Finance Subcommittee, and then we also have, the Town's Finance Committee, and we also have our Council of Schools meeting going on. So I'm kind of going between two different venues. Joanna Johnson-Collins, as you mentioned, who's our business administrator, is online as well. She is also from home and her camera is not working, but she is present and able to answer any questions if anything comes up. But just, would you like me to kind of give a little overview like we've done previously?
That'd be great.
Okay. So we're here tonight, obviously, for next year's fiscal 24 budget review. Just want to let you know the last week in January, obviously the town manager put forward his recommended budget for the town, and then I presented my recommended budget to the school committee the following Monday, which was the following Tuesday, which was the first Tuesday in February, as usual. The recommended budget amount from town manager Cohen and my recommended budget amount to the school committee matched. So that is the way we kind of started out our budget process. We had worked together since the tri-board meeting in December on the recommendation to come forward. The school committee received the budget that evening. I gave an overview of fiscal 24, and then we had a public budget hearing the Tuesday after our February vacation, which was a week ago Tuesday. We did go line by line, page by page through the budget, answered some questions, and ultimately did approve the recommendation that's before you this evening for review. I did earlier this week meet with Kathy and Sam and Dave to review the budget as the subcommittee of the group, and had a good conversation with them. Our budget for fiscal 24 is just a couple quick things for you. We followed the same format we previously have followed, that we've gotten pretty good response from, both from staff and the public, as far as it being a pretty readable document, and there's no major changes to the physical structure of the budget itself. We are recommending at this point a $3.2 million increase to the budget, going from $67.5 million to $70.7 million. That's needed by and large to provide a level service budget for the school department for fiscal 24. That's before you tonight. And on page 7 of the budget document, I'm just going to walk you through some of the assumptions that underlie the budget itself. One of the things that we do have, which is favorable for us, is all but one of our collective bargaining agreements were resolved last summer and early this fall. So we do have 3-year contracts in place with all of our major employee unions. We had one group, our school building custodians, who do a phenomenal job. They happen to have an off-cycle contract. So their contract is currently still in place through this coming June 30th. We're going to start negotiating with them at the end of this month. That particular group is a small group. There's only 10 individuals within the group, so it's not a significant number-wise as far as a bargaining unit, but they do very good work for us. And I have included within the budget document, as I do when we don't have a contract that's settled, a line item for contract settlement for a cost of living increase. So that is included within the budget document so that we would not have to come back forward to the Finance Committee or the Town Committee for approval after that contract is settled. But we do have all of our other contracts in place as of July 1, which was really nice to be able to work from. We're only having district-wide 7 retirements this year, so we have a very low retirement year. It really speaks positively to the staff that we have. I think they are very committed, do an outstanding job in the district, and we have very few retirements. I do like to, when we have retirements, recoup the savings between the retiring individual, who's typically a more veteran person, and an incoming person. We budget at Master Step 3. That has traditionally worked out fairly well for us. I've done that again this year, but we really haven't recouped much savings this year in doing so because we just have so few retirements. But the retirement savings that we can recoup has already been included within the budget itself. And we did make a few minor tweaks to the budget going forward for this year. The first one, if you recall, last year, we started a language-based special education program at Parker Middle School for incoming 5th grade students. That's a program that's going to grow each year. So obviously those 5th grade students are going to go up to 6th grade next year and need to be supported in 6th grade. And we have a new group of 4th grade students who are going to be going up to 5th grade who are going to need to be supported. So next year and then the next 2 years, we're going to need to add an additional special education position to support that language-based program. So we did include one additional special education staff member at Parker for next year, again, to service that program. We also in the district currently have 3 LPN nurses. We have full-time RN nurses at each of our schools, and just because of the number of students and staff at the 2 middle schools and the high school, we also currently have had, or historically have had, a .7 LPN nurse in each of those schools. And just the number of nursing demands has really gone up over the years. I've talked annually with the nursing coordinator, and they have been recommending we try to increase that ratio a little bit of student to staff. So I did incorporate into the budget an increase for those 3 positions to go from .7 to 1.0. It wasn't a significant investment in salary, and because they were already over .5, they were already benefit eligible, so there's no extra benefit package on the town side to consider. So I did include those 3 positions going from .7 to 1.0. And then lastly, we have had a very successful and an ever-expanding special education program for some of our students on the autism spectrum over at the Byam Elementary School. And the number of students in that particular program are just expanding, and we have a significant number that are moving up from our CHIPS preschool program to elementary school in the fall. And it was becoming a point where we're going to have to expand from 3 classrooms at Byam to 4, and we really don't have the capacity within Byam to do that. So we're going to replicate the program at Harrington Elementary School next year, so that we're going to have 2 classrooms at Harrington and then 2 classrooms at Byam. There are no additional staff that are going to be required from the teaching end. One of the Byam positions will float over to Harrington, and then one of our CHIPS positions will come up with the students to Harrington. So we don't have to hire any additional teaching staff. It's really just a reallocation of the staffing that we have. But we do need some additional BCBA support for that program. And the Harrington currently has a .5 BCBA. Byam has a 1.0 BCBA to support the program and also the rest of the students in the school. So we are recommending an increase from 0.5 to 1.0 on the BCBA. Again, on the town side, that wouldn't have any additional cost because the position is already benefit eligible. It's just the extra salary that we have to pick up on the school side. And I did include that within our budget. Just as an aside, we are keeping our day-to-day and long-term substitute teacher rates the same. We had increased them last year for the fiscal 23 budget. I think that was obviously needed to be able to compete with our neighboring towns and districts. We still, like our neighboring towns and districts, are having a difficult time attracting staff to those positions. But I think our rate structure that we put in place for this year makes us competitive and is a good structure to continue with. So we're going to continue with that next year, no increases. And this will actually be the next year, the full implementation of our 101 computer initiative. In the district, we had reached the 4-year mark this year. So next year, again, it'll be the first time that we have to utilize some of our school choice funds to fund the lease for the new computers for the incoming 5th and 9th grade students. So that's kind of a milestone for us. It was a program, again, we phased in over 4 years. We have not had to tap the local operating budget to support that at all. It's either supported through school choice funds that we take in, or over the last 2 years, we've also received extra COVID-related funds that we've been able to earmark toward that. But it's no increase on the local budget at all, but it certainly is a significant step that we took, which, again, I'm very happy to have taken going into the pandemic and really the need for increased technology both at home and within schools. So really this year in general, that's kind of the overview. There is no significant changes within the budget staffing wise, except what I had just mentioned to you. The one cost which did increase and kind of was our big budget driver this year was out of district special education tuition. And not necessarily because we're sending more students out of district. We've actually done a very good job of maintaining the number of students we have going out, or actually offering some of them in district programming that we've developed over the last number of years. That's been very well subscribed and received. The state ended up increasing at a very significant amount, about 14%, the tuition costs for out of district schools. So that was, close to about a $900,000 increase to us just on current tuitions, not additional tuitions going out. I don't want people to think we're increasing the number of students we have in out-of-district placements. It's just the cost of the current tuitions is going up significantly next year. That's a rate that has typically gone up between 2 and 3%. But the State Operations Services Division, which sets the rates, did agree to a 14% increase next year for them. That has been something that the superintendent's group, I know the Town Managers Association, have been really looking hard at. We're looking to try to get some relief for that. Typically, we wouldn't see that kind of an increase in one fiscal year, but we're yet to kind of see what might happen with the House budget or the Senate budget when that comes out, if there'll be any extra relief coming to us for those costs. But that is a significant piece of the $3.2 million increase for next year. As I indicated, the bulk of the budget is really level service with a couple of those minor tweaks I mentioned, but the significant cost is the extra special ed tuition. So I'm more than happy, like I said, to answer any questions you may have. Again, we did a page-by-page review of the budget with the school committee. I thought we had a good conversation with the subcommittee earlier this week, and very much appreciate your time, consideration, and support of our budget.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I'd just like to say it's always a pleasure meeting with you, Jay, and it seems like everything is going very well, and I applaud your efforts on behalf of the students of Chelmsford.
No, thank you very much. We're actually having a very good school year, kind of coming out of the pandemic. This is the most regular school year we've had in a couple of years. I think the pandemic challenged every school system. We certainly felt the pinch of it in Chelmsford as well. But I think our, some of the pre-work we had done around some of the technology enhancements, a lot of the different social emotional learning enhancements within town going into the pandemic really set ourselves up well for being able to deliver very good services and keep the connections with our staff and families and students through the pandemic. We're having, like I said, a very good year overall. I really, just applaud the staff of the district, from our teachers and support staff. Our custodians are excellent. Our food service people have worked, above and beyond through the whole pandemic and coming out of it. It really is a great school system, and I'm happy to lead it and work very closely with our administrative team and school committee in the town to put out a very good product. So thank you, Kathy, for your words.
Any other questions or comments? Now, just to make sure I'm clear, the number that's included in this particular budget, the number we're working with, does not include any adjustment for the recently released governor's budget, correct?
That's correct. The $70.7 million budget is kind of the pre-budget. It was based on what we had anticipated prior to the governor's released budget. I was, we actually met with the school committee to talk about it. I've talked to Town Manager Cohen as well. I was a little bit surprised when the governor's budget came out and the rate had increased that much. I think pleasantly surprised, but I think we all want to wait and make sure that that's really a true number that's going to hold. On the school committee side, I know the school committee members, we're going to be doing some work with their legislators around that particular number, and obviously supporting the Chapter 70 increase for Chelmsford. I think we're all thrilled to see that. We have also worked with Roger Hatch, who was he's now retired business administrator, finance director from Mass DESI, a couple of times to do some Chapter 70 analysis and projections for us. I engaged him again just within the last 2 weeks to do kind of a deep dive into Chelmsford's formula, why the governor's budget included that amount. A lot of it on the surface seems to have to do with the inflation number that was used, a little bit of student increase, which we are seeing in the district. But he's going to, within the next week or so, have a preliminary report together for us that I anticipate being presented to the school committee at their meeting on March 21st, to just try to better understand exactly how the formula resulted in this increase for Chelmsford. Again, I think we want to see if it's a true increase, if it's going to sustain, and it'll be telling if that number is also in the House budget and ultimately the Senate budget, which comes before us. As interested as I am in, obviously, for next year, fiscal 24, I'm even more interested for 25 and beyond, because I'd like to see if this is a trend that's going to continue, what we can project, for future budgets. Obviously, the budget before you, I think, is a solid budget for next year. And, if the additional funding hadn't come in, it still sets us up for a very successful, 23-24 school year. But I'll just be curious to see exactly what the long-term implications of this are to help for internal planning. Some of the response to our recent strategic plan, we're currently undergoing a special education opportunities review that I'm sure there'll be some recommendations for some additional staffing and programs or whatnot. So this really could set us up in a positive light moving forward, knowing that we may have the additional Chapter 70 funding to help out the town and the schools. I know we've been a minimum aid district for quite some time. The $30 a head or $150,000 a year out of what's typically been at least a $2 to $2.5 million increase doesn't go far. So if this is something that obviously is going to sustain, I think we'd be thrilled about that. But I really do trust Roger's analysis. He was one of the individuals that helped create the whole funding formula. So he's really, again, doing that deep dive for us. And I did mention to the subcommittee, when we get that report and present it to the school committee on the 21st, I will send a copy to the finance committee so that you can see that and kind of his explanation for where we are anticipated for 23, but again, for 24, but really looking deeper into the future for how it might impact 25 and beyond.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lang. Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Collins, and thank you, Chair Newcomb, for being here this evening. You guys are playing double duty this evening, so you're released. Go.
Just a question of practice. Do you need me to come back later in the meeting in case there were any questions, or can I move over to the other meeting and stay?
You can move over to the other meeting. That's fine. Any additional questions that may come in public comment, we'll direct to you, and we'll probably be voting either on not the 23rd, probably the 30th of March. So that evening will be a meeting where we spend a lot of time going over and reviewing and making our votes.
Okay. If anything does come up, just please let me know, and I'm happy to respond.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along on the agenda, we have a review of the fiscal year 24 budget at the Cemetery Commission. With us this evening, we have the Cemetery Superintendent, David Boyle. Good evening.
Good evening. How you doing, everybody? My budget's nothing like Jay's, but there's a slight increase here and there. As far as the personnel side, it's just an increase with steps for the entire group. As far as on the expense side, it's a total of $2,975, and the biggest increase would be for we put a fire alarm system in the building here at Pine Ridge, both buildings actually. Here at Pine Ridge Cemetery. So it's just basically for the maintenance, the coverage of the fire alarm system that we get charged. Obviously, fuel, diesel, gasoline. Other than that, just a little bit for energy, for gas, for gas heat and electric. But other than that, not a lot of changes.
We see your goals here. They're continuing the improvements at Pine Ridge and Section K.
Yeah, so Section M is online. We put that back. We got that online in June of last year, and actually I have the other section that we're finishing up development this year, and hope to be able to at least hydroseed it and get it ready to go. But that'll be wrapping up as far as Pine Ridge goes.
Any questions or comments?
Just one quick question, David.
Sure.
Your part-time personnel,
Yes.
what is the makeup of that?
That's a 19-hour secretarial job.
19-hour secretary?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Next on our agenda, we have a review of the fiscal year 24 budget for the Finance Department, including accounting, assessors, information technology, and treasury and collection. With us this evening, we have the Finance Director and Treasurer, John Souza. Good evening.
Thanks, John.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. Back on, I believe it was February 22nd, Darlene Lucia, Town Accountant, Frank Reen, our Chief Assessor, Ted Luter, IT Director, and myself met virtually with Anita Tanini and John Tebow as our Finance Committee liaison. So we reviewed the budget with them at that time and answered some questions that they had. Provided this handout to them. So what I'd like to do is just to walk through this by division with you. So the first page is just a quick summary of what the main duties and functions of each division. And then the next page has the budget goals for the upcoming year in fiscal year 24. The third page shows the staffing summary by each office. And the important thing to note here is for the coming budget year, there's zero increase. The number of full-time equivalent employees remains at 14.4 for all of the 4 offices. And you can see that's been the trend for several years. And then we come to the line item budget, the first office, the Treasurer's Collector's Office. Just to walk through this line item budget with you, you'll see that personnel salaries for the coming year is increasing $15,507. That's about a 4% increase. That's for steps for any eligible personnel. And let's see, there's a very small increase in longevity. Then under expenses, looking down the bottom half of the page, most of the items are level funded except for contract services. There's a $2,000 increase. That's for we have an ASP support contract with Munis, which is the town's financial software package. And we maintain, so that support contract is increasing. And I believe that's the only increase, the $2,000 in that budget. So our total expenses for the coming year are budgeted at just over $222,000. And then moving on to the next office is our information technology department. The salaries you'll see, those are increasing they're increasing to $260,432, and I wanted to explain, as I did at our liaison meeting, the reason that increase is roughly about 11% is you may have heard me discuss at a past select board meeting the town entered into a interagency agreement with the Chelmsford Housing Authority, which is a separate entity from the town. And our IT staff is going to be providing IT services to the Housing Authority. And in exchange for that, the Housing Authority will be paying the town a sum of money for the next 5 fiscal years. And the way this works is for taking on these additional duties, both IT employees will receive a portion of the the amount of the contract amount that's being paid for taking on that work. And so that's why I just wanted to explain, that's why that appears to be larger than what you would normally see, for a personnel budget increase. Under expenses, in the computer maintenance area, you'll see that line is increasing $29,000 in the coming year. The reason for that is our IT staff is going to be doing a complete upgrade of our antivirus software. And then under contracted services, there's a minor increase of about $1,000. That's for a support contract increase. So in total, the IT expense budget's increasing about $30,000. And so the total budget for personnel and salaries is just over $604,000 for the coming year. Then we move on to the assessor's office. Personnel services is increasing just over $11,400. It's just under about a 4% increase. That covers steps and a cost of living allowance for the non-union personnel in that office. And then under expenses, there's a couple of lines. There's a $3,000 increase in the revaluation update line. You'll see it's going up to $97,000. The reason for that is the assessor's office uses contract services on certain, for certain revaluation projects like personal property. They use a contract service to do that. They do a very good job at gathering all the data on personal property owned by several businesses. And so that's a small increase for the contract there. There's a $200 increase in the mapping line, and then the $2,000 increase under contracted services. That's to cover appraisal services that are needed for a few cases that are expected to come before the appellate tax board. And so, let's see, the only other line that I see a change on, the staff education's decreasing $500. It's just there's less of a need now for the amount of seminars and things like that. So the total budget, the expense budget's increasing about $6,700 to $173,700, and the total assessor's budget for the coming year is budgeted at just under $497,000. And then the last office is the accounting office, and you'll see on this page that personnel services are budgeted to increase just under $16,000 for the coming year, and that's about a 4.3% increase. There's a small increase in longevity for eligible employees. So in total, personnel services are increasing just over $16,000. On the expense side, the only two changes are in the audit services line, which is just a few lines up from the bottom of the page. That's increasing $3,000. That's due to the contract that we have with a new audit firm that performed the fiscal year 22 audit. The contract also covers the next 2 fiscal years. And then there is a small increase, and you'll see in the line it says GASB actuarial update. That's for our OPEB. That's for the contractor that the actuarial firm that helps us update our OPEB valuation every year. And so that's a $300 increase there. So you'll see the accounting budget's increasing a total of $3,300 to just over $456,000. And then the last page just gives you a breakout of all of the personnel and salaries and steps.
Kathy, I'm seeing you have a question?
Just a quick question, under accounting, there was line items for part-time personnel, and then that seems to have just gone away. So does that person become a full-time person, or you no longer have part-time personnel?
I believe,
When,
yeah, I believe, Kathy, that we just absorbed them into it was just added into the full-time line. Basically, in the town accountant's office, there is just there's one part-time person. It's actually a retiree that does a lot of work on tracking health insurance and W-9s, and she basically does various, compliance work on that. And the cost for that's about 19, just under 20,000.
which is just about what it was for 22, so they just rolled it
Yes.
into the full-time. It was 19 and change for 22, and then for the, must be just rolled into the 23 budget as full-time? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
right. You know what it is? Usually, I believe that they're for budgeting purposes, we budget them under the full-time line, and looks like in prior years, what we could do going forward is I could just break that out and show it on the next line down.
Kathy, if you look at what the current bottom right, it is showing on the table of salaries and positions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm looking at my phone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
John, on the assessor's expenses, I don't see a provision for assessor's overlay. Is that normally where you would, it's not budgeted
Yeah,
here? Okay, all right.
Yep.
I got it.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. All right, moving right along. We have a review of warrant Article 21, the Specialized Energy Code Bylaw. And with us this evening, we have members of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. Joining us online to give a presentation is Bern Kosicki. And let me just bring up your presentation, Bern. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
All right, you have the floor.
Okay, I don't see your presentation yet. Oh, here it is, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for having me tonight. My job is to describe the warrant article for the town to adopt the specialized energy code. But in the process of doing that, I'm going to have to talk about some other energy codes, and that explains the title being unspecific. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'll skip that one. Okay, so our committee is like a number of committees in other towns, which with similar goals of addressing carbon emissions in their various municipalities. And the common concerns among all of these committees is shown here in these 4 points: clean energy, excuse me, building emissions, transportation emissions, and zoning use. The italicized sub-bullets show some of the strategies that our committee has for addressing these. The current zoning article addresses the building emissions. Next slide, please. So the motivation is specifically to encourage electrification of new construction buildings. The code does not address existing buildings unless they undergo extensive renovations. Building emissions reduction is an important issue at both the state and town levels because it's an important component, and Chelmsford is the main component of all our greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the relationship of the specialized code to the older stretch energy code. That code's been around for about 15 years, and its goal was to increase building energy efficiency. And it is part of the Green Communities Act, and green community towns like Chelmsford automatically agreed to adopt the stretch code and its updates. So the current stretch code update has gone into effect last January 1st and is enforced by Chelmsford right now. The reason this is important is that the specialized code has one component of it, the current stretch code, and the specialized code is really an addition to the stretch code of a few regulations. So the most of the specialized code is already going to be automatically adopted by Chelmsford since we're a green community. But the adoption of the specialized code, those additions, needs to be done by town meeting vote, and that's the reason for the warrant. If it passes town meeting, it would become effective January 1st of 2024. Next slide, please. So from now on, I'm going to talk about the differences or the additions to the stretch code, which make up the specialized code, basically. As I mentioned before, this applies only to new construction or extensive renovations, and not to existing houses that don't have any alterations made to them. Now, the specialized code allows for two paths for building energy. One is fossil fuels, gas or oil or propane, and the other is all electric buildings, which means that the building would have a heat pump and no connection to oil, gas, or propane. So all electric buildings don't have any, mostly don't, are not affected by the specialized code. If an owner chooses to build a fossil fuel building, then there's extra requirements for solar on site, and the amount of that solar varies a little bit from the type of building. And the second requirement is for the building to be pre-wired for electrical appliances, even though you may be, for example, using gas appliances presently. That means that these buildings, so the Department of Energy Resources is assuming that these buildings will be updated to electricity sometime in the future. All electric buildings do not require solar, and obviously the wiring for the electrical appliances is already there. There's a second part of the specialized code that addresses two building classes, and that is shown on the next slide. So this slide shows that there are some changes in the energy requirements for two classes of residential buildings, mid-size between 4,000 and 12,000 square feet, and residential, large-scale residential of greater than 12,000 square feet. So for the first of those, or the mid-size one, all electric has the same requirements as the updated stretch code. So no changes caused by the specialized code. If an owner chooses fossil fuels for a building, then it requires an upgrade in the energy standard, which was in the stretch code. For a large multifamily residential buildings. Both the all-electric and the mixed fossil fuel buildings require a step up from what was required by the stretch code only. Just to give you these strange abbreviations here are methods for classifying buildings. HERS stands for Home Energy Rating System, and FEOS, for example, stands for Passive House Institute of US. And these are ways to classify buildings to see if they're going to comply with the code or not. Next slide, please. So in summary, I've tried to explain that the specialized code is basically the stretch code with some additions made to it. It applies only to new construction. And for owners that choose fossil fuel, you need to add solar to the site, need to have pre-wiring, and for 4,000 square foot buildings, energy efficiency upgrade. And then the last bullet applies actually both for all electric and fossil fuel for 12,000 square foot large buildings, upgrade from the stretch code also. The effective date of the new code would be January 1 of 2024 if it passes town meeting. Last slide, please. So this just goes over again the rationale for this. Building emissions are a principal contributor, and this is an important step in the road. It's not a silver bullet, but it's an important step. And it does build on Chelmsford's legacy of sustainability. So with that, I will try to take your questions if you have any.
All right, are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, question, I didn't understand, existing 4,000 square foot residential structures, do they require any upgrade?
You mean if there's no construction? If they're not new construction?
They're not new constructing, they're existing.
Yeah, only if they have extensive renovation. And
Okay.
that extensive renovation means greater than 50% of the floor area, or I think 1,000 square feet, something like that. But if it's existing and there's no construction, there's no renovation being made to it, then no.
So it's an either-or threshold, 1,000 square feet or 50% of the FAR?
My reading of it, yes, that whichever one comes first, probably.
Okay. Because that was my question too. What is an extensive renovation?
Exactly.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. So this slide is to imply that houses under 4,000 square feet are not affected by this?
No, they are affected. They are required to have solar, but in the case, this is for a new house now.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're going to make an extensive renovation to an existing house, which is greater than 50% of the area of that house. If neither of those apply, then there's no requirement for the solar. The solar is only for new construction or extensive renovations. But the solar requirement for an under 4,000 square foot house, I believe, is 4,000 watts, which is smallish size installation compared to the ones you see on houses around in Chelmsford right now. So if you don't do anything to your house, there's no requirement.
Okay, thank you.
I guess it's a subjective question, but will the cost of new construction be more expensive now or less expensive in Chelmsford?
Well, you mean are you asking the question about will the stretch code itself cause the cost of construction to increase? Or is the specialized code going to cost?
I think both.
Both, right?
So let me answer that in two parts. The stretch code requires a more energy efficient building than before the stretch code. So before January 1st, a building with the old stretch code was not required to be as energy efficient as it is now after January 1st. That is independent of the specialized code. So there's probably some additional expenses for that upgrade. I've got some, I think there's a slide in here about expenses which are more which are in the order of 1% for a very extensive upgrade in energy efficiency. So that's the sort of standard I think that you might be looking at. Now, if the specialized code is applied, then and the owner wants to add fossil fuel for the new building instead of keeping it all electric, then that owner would have to put up solar on the roof. That's an extra expense, but there have been studies that show that the price of a building, a house with solar, is slightly higher than the price of that house without solar, and that price differential is roughly equal to the cost of the solar. So it sort of washes out if the building is being built as a spec building, I believe.
My name is Badriu Pip, and I'm also a member of the CEA's committee. I wanted to add some clarification. It is a subjective question or answer for that as to what the cost is, but first order, it will be about similar pricing, especially if it's done in scale. As more and more buildings come on board, the technology or the building infrastructure will increase better and be able to support some of the insulation ratings and capacities there. Additionally, it also is subjective because we have to understand, what is the cost that you're looking at? Is it at the initial build cost, or are you looking at operating costs inclusive, and how long are you looking at building and amortizing that? And so there's benefits when you look at a longer range horizon, even though the start price may be better. It's like paying for an extra X amount of dollars, but you get a better product that lasts you better, higher quality, lower operating costs kind of a situation. So all of that generally has to be modeled out and stuff. But in general, this code is expected, according to state study levels, while initial costs may vary plus or minus some things as a percentage depending on who you go with and what the expertise is with the specific builders, over the a certain duration, it will be a more optimal operating cost inclusive, better system or whole. So, thanks.
So I have a couple questions. The exception for less than 4,000 square foot single family when the site's shaded, does that simply mean that there'll be no requirement for solar if there's a site shaded and it's less than 4,000 square foot new construction?
Yes, I believe that's right. My reading of the code is that exception means that no solar is required in the case of shading.
I might add that might require a little bit more subjective discussion. Over time, there may not be a clear line as to how much, because some portion of this, roof line may not be more effective, so some portion could be, and so we may require a little bit more read on that, just FYI, so to speak.
Right.
And the building commissioner may be able to comment on it as part of the exceptions and where it happens.
I guess for the extensive renovation where it's either greater than 1,000 or 1,000 square feet or a 50% increase in the FAR greater than, I mean, do we foresee there being issues where people now have to replace their roofs because their construction project's now going to require the installation of solar and their roof might not be graded properly for a solar installation?
It's possible that there may be situations, it's quite possible, but again, it's a subjective assessment where if you are doing 1,000 square foot, I think there are most homes at 1,000 square foot in Chelmsford probably is 30% or 50, close to 50%, depending on the size of the homes probably. But again, it's a subjective notion where people will have to take that into account. There may be a slight architectural change that will have to come in terms of the roof line of the, if there's an addition or something. If they're doing an interior renovation, then probably there's the fact that they are upgrading their insulation standard very well could mean that they have enough savings that they don't need a solar or something. So there are some subjectives to be done and looked at in that regime.
Is the,
I don't, my,
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Ben.
yeah, my reading is that there's, in no case would a person be required to rebuild a roof while doing an extensive renovation. There's formulas for figuring out how much solar can be put on the roof, and my guess is that in special cases, you'd have to work within the code to figure out what happens in a particular case.
Okay. And maybe the solar requirement is the offset. Has there been discussion about the energy providers, particularly National Grid, regarding the ability to sustain the increases in the electric versus a switchover from fossil fuel, and the ability of the infrastructure to support that? Is the solar in your readings an attempt to address the increased demand?
I don't believe that's the case. In the code, it says it recognizes the solar as being a mitigation. In other words, I think that the Department of Energy Resources is looking at mitigating the fossil fuel burning by creating renewable energy to somehow offset that. There was no discussion about the grid requirements in the codes.
So maybe I can answer a little bit more expansively here.
Certainly.
Solar on rooftops is a mitigation effort, right? It's sort of the principle that why ship something from very far off when you can consume locally, and not all homes are capable of solar right now and built infrastructure. So it sort of has a soothing effect locally, potentially in that particular case. So that's a good thing. I think your question underlying is, with going all electric, is National Grid ready to adapt and provide connectivity and service lines and happening this way? So we had a conversation about a year ago with National Grid Engineering, who were giving us some guidance around how they plan and what the circuits are in Chelmsford, and we were very curious about this very same question. And they have indicated that generally they are tracking several stages of development, applications, and capabilities and stuff. So this is not going to be like a complete new subdivision coming up and 1,000 homes coming up immediately. I mean, we do have a UMass West Lowell that's coming up, but they're not considering it, I think, they're looking at heat pump plus some combinations probably. But they have said that they are looking at upgrading the infrastructure. The state of Massachusetts or Northeast, I think, has commissioned a study as electric transportation, truck transportation comes on. They have discussed about the impact and need for large upgrades. We already know there are some other challenges in terms of how to bring large renewables offshore to bring onshore, so to speak, in terms of the connectivity aspect. So, however, I think with the adoption of this particular or this stretch code, specialized code, the number of homes that we will have in Chelmsford Rising, even if it were to fully go electric, is not going to be a significant adder as a proportion to where we stand in terms of the total consumption that we end up doing. It is when we have the other effort that the state requires, which is building heating conversion from natural gas or fossil fuel to heat pumps, that electricity starts to flow a little bit more. But again, the hope is that in the next 3 to 4 years to 5 years, the main lines will get upgraded. But it is a conversation that we will continue to have with National Grid, and I think we will be asking the Select Board's help to have that review at appropriate time, and we are pushing for that to be clear. I think also with DOER's adoption of these stretch codes amongst many, many towns, the utility companies are becoming aware that they need to boost up, and so there will be other infrastructure bills or costs anyways coming up, irrespective of what we do in Chelmsford or not. So we may get grid level additional infrastructure charges irrespective, because some other town like Westwood or Acton decided to go and adopt that, and the lines are about, I mean, Acton is Eversource, but give or take, right? So, as an example.
Are we seeing other towns in the area adopting a specialized code at this time?
I think Arlington's already approved, I think, as a town. I think, I know Acton is considering, Concord is considering, but we will have a further list of other towns that we are working right now
Appreciate that,
as they
yeah.
all run through the gamut of presenting to their towns. There are a whole host that we know, at least 10 or 15 towns that are pushing for it right now, all adopting at the same time.
Was this the first year the specialized code was available to be adopted?
December 15th was when, roughly December 15th, 25th is when it was available, and we are being at the, I think the one point we want to say is it continues the legacy of Chelmsford Sustainability Initiative, but more so I think it pushes in the forefront and really says we are being true to our town's vision and values that include sustainability, right? Environmental and financial and everything else, but environmental too specifically. So we are at the pincer tip of where it is. So it will position us, I think, in terms of thought process, in terms of communicating to the outside world that we are serious about sustainability, and companies or people should consider Chelmsford as a place that is quote unquote sustainable and thinking about the future very seriously.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you all for answering questions and
Thank you.
presenting
And
this
if you
evening.
have any questions before you vote, let us know, and we are happy to answer the additions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving along on our agenda, we have a discussion, the budget hearing and springtime meeting warrant article schedule. So let's bring up the current schedule. Okay, so this evening, we've already had the capital planning. This evening, we had cemetery, public schools, finance department, and the special advice entry code bylaw. Next week, the 16th, I currently have slated the Board of Health, the Senior Center, DPW and Facilities, Police Department, Veteran Services, and then the Myland Avenue Pump Station as part of the presentation for the DPW. And then the 23rd, I have currently slated the Community Preservation Fund, including all of their articles, and there are quite a few this year. The Fire Department, the Library, and the zoning bylaw amendments, both the use of regulations, dimensional regulations. That'll be the Planning Board, the Planning Director, Evan Belansky, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. There'll be a representative from each that will be here to discuss. It's really a ZBA initiative, but it's a Planning Board article. And then the two that I don't have currently scheduled, I have Neshoba Valley School District. I don't know, as,
We met with them today.
Okay.
Okay, they would like to do it next week.
Okay.
But she needs to be first, because she has other commitments. No, it's not a question of it being funny, it's a question that she's
Yeah.
juggling several things, and if you can't accommodate that, then that presents a problem. We'll have to move it to
Move it to another
to another week.
Right.
okay. Does the 23rd work better for her?
That was, did that come up that way?
No,
No.
it was left just the way you expressed it.
Right.
Okay. So she'd like to go next week, but but she'd like to go
I'd
first.
like to go first, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's doing 2 presentations that night.
Got
Just
it.
to give you an idea of what's going on.
Oh, no, yeah, all the district towns are having their
I-
meetings.
Based on what we heard today, I don't think it's a lengthy presentation.
No,
Yeah.
no, she can,
So,
Yeah. It usually is about
So-
20 minutes or so.
right.
So is this, you're talking about the Neshoba Valley School District?
Yes.
Correct.
With Denise Pigeon? Should I have been invited to that meeting? I see my name there.
wasn't on the assignment list.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So I think we may have added you the first meeting, and it wasn't on the updated, or the updated version went around, Cindy. So I'll take the blame for that one.
No worries.
So, the PEG access and cable, I got an email from Pete today, or yesterday, regarding whether or not there needs to be a presentation, given that there's a small reduction in the budget this year. Is your feeling that,
I don't think it's necessary for
Okay.
him to come in.
okay, that's fine.
Yep.
So we'll take that off, and we'll just discuss. I'll circulate what's forwarded, and we'll discuss when we go to vote on the 30th, that particular portion of the budget. And that takes care of all the scheduling for upcoming. So that will leave us with the 30th for voting. I would ask everyone to please make an effort to be here. And hopefully we'll get through it pretty quickly. It should be a relatively, hopefully, light lifting night as far as going through and voting and reviewing the budget. So, as far as the warrant schedule after that, we already have the schedule, but I'll recirculate that, Pam, to the group as far as getting comments and notes in for any particular votes, and then the letter to the chairman letter. And then we'll, just refresh my recollection, Pam, we'll be looking to publish that on April. And I
So
don't,
if you vote on the 30th,
Yep.
basically, it depends on when you get the letter, because
Yep.
that usually is the last thing. And
Yep.
so whenever the letter comes, it'll be already other than the letter,
okay.
and then it can go, so.
And is it the 24th is the, okay, the 24th, the last Monday in April.
It's the meeting, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if we vote on the 30th, we should have a significant time to get everything together and get everything published and placed, especially for pre-town meeting. Perfect. Any public comment? I'm seeing nothing in the Zoom room and no public to speak of, other than our manager.
No public.
Any press questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. And just for the record, Pam, John joined the meeting as well, so he voted on
Oh.
that as well.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
I need to let Denise know one way or the other, so when you make your decision, let me know.
I will, yeah.